Hi there. Welcome to this Living Simpler episode. This is going to be a little different than normal. This is actually going to be an interview with two other women with MOG. And we're going to talk a little bit about their life and their experiences with MOG. And I want this to just be an open conversation. You'll notice that when you watch the interview, that I actually said very little. I did not want to give any version of medical advice or guidance. I asked things as questions. And after we stopped the recording, there was a conversation about a doctor in Massachusetts that was talking in particular about how he's waiting for the evidence/studies to show that MOG is being either created or aggravated by gut health. And so if you know my story is that I ended up with mold poisoning a couple of years ago after I've had a series of other kind of health issues. I'm a master fitness instructor. I owned fitness studios. I consider myself to be a very, very healthy person. And so when I was diagnosed with MOG, otherwise known as MOGAD, it was a big surprise. So to be told that I have a very traumatic autoimmune disease and that the closest thing to it is something like MS, it was quite a surprise for me. In my studies with integrative health practitioner, I've learned a lot about gut health, immune health, autoimmune diseases, and things like that. And I'm very fortunate that I have a neurologist that has been willing to humor me and help me try to manage my disease through supplements, through lifestyle, and not forcing me to do a lot of the medications that are so extreme with something like MOG or MS. So I hope you enjoy this episode. This is probably one that you might want to listen to on like a 1.25, maybe a 1.5. There's some dialogue, and unfortunately, we have a little bit of like speaking over each other. So hopefully, you'll be able to hear and understand all of it. But I think that anyone that is having questions about what it's like to have health one day and then all of a sudden some type of severe autoimmune reaction where your body is literally attacking itself, I think it's going to be very interesting for you to hear some of that experience and those stories so you can understand that your immune health, your gut health, and the lifestyle decisions that we are making are genuinely going to mean the difference between being healthy and potentially not being healthy at some point in your life. So enjoy. If you have any questions or you want to discuss this with me, send me a DM. And I hope that this is an educational podcast episode. It's not going to be the most entertaining, but I do think that you will find it interesting to hear from two other women who were healthy one day and then all of a sudden were completely not healthy, and how they have recovered, what they're doing to try to resolve some of those issues and all that. So enjoy. Welcome to the Living Simpler podcast. I'm Amy Mewborn, and I actually had just been diagnosed with MOGAD back in November-ish of last year. And I found out because I'd had mold poisoning about a year and a half prior and had been in and out of doctors and seen, it felt like everyone and their brother basically, and no one could tell me what was going on. And then about a year and a couple months later, I ended up falling down the stairs and went into the emergency room and had swelling on my brain and all kinds of spots and things like that. And it took a number of months to actually find a neurologist that could diagnose me with anything at all. They kept saying MS, but it doesn't really look like MS. and that kind of thing. So I'm really eager to chat with each of you, Sandra and Marla, about your diagnosis, how it had been found, and how you have done since then. Sandra, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about your story.
I had basically my legs. I was at my parents' place in May of 2023, and it was in the middle of the night. Basically, I was helping my parents clean the house because my mom had cancer. Anyways, I was in the middle of the night, get up to go use the bathroom, and my legs just give out. I had no feeling. They just, boom, down I went. And so I just slid myself back to the bedroom, and I didn't even have strength in my arms to get myself back into bed.
Wow.
I spent the rest of the night lying on the floor. I didn't want to wake up my mom because the way I thought she needed her rest, she's dealing with what she's dealing with and doing her treatments. I'm not waking her up. There's no way. The morning, Mom asked if I was getting up for breakfast, and her wee dog said, all of a sudden came in and gave me kisses, waking me up. And I said, I'd come for breakfast, but I can't get up off the floor. So anyways, I called my stepdad in, and they helped pick me up, got me to the couch. And then I tried going to the bathroom again, and down I went yet again. So by that, they called the ambulance, and I went to hospital here in Owen Sound. So I had a neurologist here, and he was doing blood work, and I had not one, but 2 spinal taps done. And they're saying, I don't know what's wrong. We don't know. It looks like MS, but it's not MS, but we don't know. But yet I was fortunate enough that my neurologist here in Owen Sound was consulting with an MS specialist in London, Ontario. So that helped me. So I was basically in Owen Sound Hospital for 4 weeks. So basically my speech was off. I couldn't write. I couldn't talk. I had to use a sippy cup in order to drink. It was bad. I couldn't even text. My sister and I used to text a lot. I couldn't even do that.
Wow.
So it was rough, and I tried to stay positive for my mom, but it took until I come home from hospitals for them to finally diagnose it.
And how did they finally find it?
Through the spinal taps. They really had to look for the proteins through the spinal taps. That's why they did just in case. People say spinal taps are painful. Well, I didn't feel nothing because I had all sorts of inflammation in my back. So I didn't feel nothing.
Wow.
But I was given a choice of, I think it was the plasma exchange or prednisone through IV. And I said, let's just do the prednisone.
And what happened from there?
From there, the swelling went down.
Okay.
So I was at the Owen Sound Hospital for 4 weeks. Then I went to Wyerton Hospital for 6 weeks to do rehab, to get my legs going and whatnot. And I had to learn speech therapy. So it was grueling, but I had to keep positive because being in Wyerton, my stepmother couldn't come down and see me on account of her cancer. But so I would either text her one day if I could or call her. And I had her help me with my speech therapy. So what they asked me to do, I would take a picture of it with my phone and I would send it to her so she could help guide me as we were talking.
Wow.
So it took a long time before they found out what it was.
Yeah. Same for me.
I didn't find out till almost a year later when I got home. I was told it was NMO. I can't remember the wording for it. And then MS. And finally they said it's MOGAD. And I said, really?
Yeah. What's that? Everyone's like, what's that? I've never heard of that.
It's an autoimmune disease. And it's, how do I get it? We don't know. It's just one of those things. And it's
Yeah.
But even then, I kept doing my rehab and my exercises to keep myself going. And I made it home, and I got some surprising news between last night and today. With all the exercises and physio that I have been doing, I have the PSWs come twice a day to visit me since I've been home since 2023. We figure my health's good enough that I don't need the PSWs anymore.
Yeah.
Today's my last day.
So tell me, are you on
So
any long-term medications now?
yes, I'm basically on what they call Lyrica or pregabalin 4 times a day. 2 in the morning, 1 at lunch, 1 at supper, and 1 at bed.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about what that is.
Oh, that is just more or less to help with the nerve pain, basically. Because I know the nerve pain for me is like, I get itchy under the skin. It's like I got bugs crawling under my skin.
Oh my.
So I find the damp weather bothers me, or if it gets too hot and humid, and that's when I feel like, oh, I've got stuff crawling all over me, but there's nothing there. Or if there's a little hair, or there's a tag from a sweater, it irritates me. And so that kind of helps that out.
Yeah. That actually makes a lot of sense because when I started doing the research, MOGAD is basically a nerve disorder. It's autoimmune that affects the nerves. And so that makes a lot of sense that some of our symptoms might be in things like fingers, eyes, spinal columns. I notice it sometimes in my hands. So yeah.
Yeah, I get my hands, my feet, my thighs really bother me. But I do find that a change of diet has helped me.
Me too.
I watch my sugars and the processed sugars. Because if I have a lot of that, then I find it flares me up. And I think that was a big part of got me in the hospital was I like my coffee creamer. I like the flavored, and I had too much of it. And I think that's what caused all that inflammation. But I'm better now than where I was even 2 years ago. It's just totally amazing. It blows my mind.
Congratulations. I'm so glad we got to share your amazing news today. And yes, you are completely correct. MOGAD is absolutely an inflammatory type disease, an autoimmune disease. And so much of my treatment has been in how I am meticulous now about how I eat. Don't really drink a whole lot anymore. And I used to love a great glass of wine. And I don't do that hardly ever anymore. Hardly any processed sugars. My meals are not terribly exciting during the day. It's Greek yogurt with protein powder and creatine and collagen and all of these things that are not amazing foods. But when I add them all together, I'm getting the best nutrition I can get to be the healthiest version of myself. And it's really hard when we travel to really still stay on plan and make sure that when I go back to my parents, they have very different eating habits. They live in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's very different than I live in Vegas by California. And it's definitely a complete lifestyle shift to try to keep myself in my version of remission. So, Marla, I would love to hear a little bit about your story.
Retrospectively, we figured out that my first episode, if we're going to call it that, I've only had one flare. It was December 17th, 2024. I'm brand new to all this. I'm not even a whole year out. I woke up and my left leg was numb, like wasn't moving, wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. Went to the emergency room, and the first thing they ask you is, have you had a fall? About a week, 2 weeks prior, I didn't fall all the way. I was going down the stairs, and you know how your heel just hits that one stair and you slide. But I had been holding onto the railing. So I did every twist and turn and wiggle before I got my seat back on there. Honestly, I should have just fallen. So we were thinking, okay, I must have wrenched something in my lower back. Imaging was done. No lesions on my spine, nothing broken, this and that. We were just thinking, must be from the fall. Interesting, when I look at those notes back again, I was discharged home with instructions to follow up with orthopedics. I was given a 5-day course of steroids because if I've inflamed anything, there we go. And I thought, wow, now when I look back at it, 1 week later, Christmas Eve, I woke up with double vision.
Oh my.
And because it's Christmas Eve, did I do anything about it? No, I wrapped a bunch of presents, finished the dish I was making, and got to my daughter's house. My daughter's a doctor.
Wow.
And she finally looked at me, she goes, you've been weird all night, what's going on? And my husband knocked me out. She'd been having double vision all day. And she's like, why are you here, emergency room now? So back to the emergency room a week after that first episode. By this point, I had finished the 5-day course of oral steroids. Convinced, I heard the word stroke so many times. I had sat around touching my nose and doing all those things. I can do it by rote now. Had to be a stroke. Imaging of my brain ensued. See cervical spine. Nothing showed a stroke. But it had to be. It had to be. What the heck? I'm a lady that I just turned 64 at the end of last year, so it must be a stroke. So didn't think much of it. I was discharged full with instructions to follow up with an ophthalmologist, who I saw on December 26th.
Wow. That was
I had worked on December 23rd. I'm an ultrasound tech, by the way. So that's what makes the vision part of this the hard part of what I do or don't do. I worked on the 23rd. From the 24th, I had 2 weeks off. So it wasn't like I was missing any work or anything like that. So I had all the time in the world to go see doctors. So saw an ophthalmologist. Looked in my eye, had me looking all over the place. He had no explanation for me, but probably the most maddening thing, everybody that I know who's had this has had one thing said to them that you're just like, are you joking? He said, there's not much more I can do for you with this double vision. I think what you need to do is see a neurologist. Here is his number. Good luck getting in.
wow.
Yeah. So that was a Thursday. Friday morning, I called. I have yet to have ever received a phone call back from that neurology office.
Oh.
So that was Friday morning, and they closed at noon. So I'm like, I'm not seeing him anymore. Started doing some errands with my husband. My double vision rectified itself. I suddenly didn't have double vision on Friday. So I was like, okay, I'll just let this sit for the weekend. And Monday morning, I'm just going to go be a squeaky wheel and just demand to have something happen. Sunday, we were at my daughter's again, and I noticed my right eye. It was like a fog was moving over it. And I didn't think it. I said, it is now Sunday night. No point in wasting my time on the phone. First thing Monday morning. I woke up Monday morning and had absolutely no sight in this eye. It was just black. So called that same ophthalmologist, not that I really wanted to, but he'd already seen me once and now I was worse. Brought him back in. He was shining that little light directly in my eye and I didn't even know it. That's how bad it was. He sent me to the retina specialist ophthalmologist down the street who got me in and did a bunch of different things. He was convinced this had to be an ophthalmic artery stroke. His office connected to the hospital. He said, I am going to have my staff member escort you over to the emergency room, and I've written down what I want them to do. Again, we're still hanging on the stroke. Once again, called my daughter who ran out of her clinic to come down there. And whenever you're talking stroke of any kind, the first thing everybody says is time is of the essence. You got to do it. I did not have an MRI of my orbits until midnight that day. So that had been one of our things. It's like, if we think it's stroke, why are we taking so long? Why are things getting worse? But either way, I stayed overnight Monday. They kept me in. They finally did my MRI at midnight. So I guess that was going to be a thing. There was talk about doing an echocardiogram so that to see if I could have it, if there were clots that could be blocking the artery. Again, they were just hanging on stroke. And I was being seen by a neurologist in the hospital at this point. And left it at that. So I stayed overnight. The next day, nobody could explain anything. At this point, my only issue was my eye. My leg had been working again, nothing much going on. Now it's New Year's, going home, written instructions to see that neurologist within the week and to also follow up with my internal medicine doctor. Called that particular neurologist's office to make an appointment within the week and was told, oh no, she says you can come here in 2 weeks. I'm blind in one eye. And I don't think 2 weeks worked for me. But anyway, whatever, made the appointment, which ultimately was canceled. But that's another story. Thankfully, my internal medicine doctor got me right in. And one of the other things, I was supposed to see a physical therapist on the advice of the neurologist. And I put the orders in. So my internal medicine said, yeah, you need to see somebody. So I put the orders in. Called the physical therapist. That's the person who I think in that whole medical system that I have been going to for decades. And I loved them and trusted them implicitly. So this was just, it was kind of heartbreaking for me that the ball was being dropped so many times. called a physical therapist, got a call back, and he's like, they sent you to me because I see the people who have had a stroke. I do physical for people who've had a stroke. You very obviously have not had a stroke. It's all over your record here that they can't find evidence of a stroke. So I explained what was going on. He said the magic words to me. I don't think you need me, and I don't think you need neurology. You need a neuro-ophthalmologist. I'd never heard this before. And that changed everything for me. My sister, who's like my cheerleader and all of this stuff, is very fond of an eye center that's near her. Called there with less than 2 weeks. I was able to see Dr. Price. Got an appointment for the end of January. Unfortunately, from the beginning of January to the time I saw him, I suddenly had balance issues. I had walking issues. I now had a walker. Drunk toddler is what my husband called it. Didn't know what was going on with me. I'm like, why am I blind in one eye? What was going on with my eye? So in the weeks that ensued, took my cane and hobbled into the neuro-ophthalmologist's office at the end of January. The speech thing is sporadic. It's not a constant. And my best phrase for it was, my tongue got stuck in my head. My thoughts were here. Like I was having no trouble thinking what I was supposed to say. But all of a sudden, things would just lock up. And especially if I had turned this way or this way to talk to somebody, that would bring it on. So people who were around me enough, they knew what my movement was. If I just suddenly went, if I was talking and then I went like this, inside of my mouth, what I was doing,
You were
was
rolling your tongue, yeah.
putting my tongue back in my head was my phrase for it. And so if it started, I could stop it. And it just sounded like I lost my train of thought. That's how it would have come across. But anyways, throughout January, it got worse. That January 14th appointment was canceled. It was moved to February. And I'm blind and I can't drive. I can't work. Hi, I'm an ultrasound tech. I'm not doing anything. So I couldn't do anything. Went into Dr. Price's office. They had an appointment and they told me it was going to be long. It was 4 hours.
Wow.
Did a bajillion tests all morning. Tests were being processed and I finally got to meet with him. So we sat, we talked. And even from the start, he still wasn't thinking much of that. He was trying to figure out, yeah, this is a different kind of, you've got this, but you don't have that. And there's that, but there's not that. So towards the end of that, we were thinking, is it maybe giant cell arteritis is where we went. And the only definite way to diagnose that is a temporal artery biopsy.
Oh,
So
wow.
we started moving in that direction. I thought, okay, fine, we'll do that. At the end of it, then he said, we're going to have you do a bunch of blood tests, and then we're going to do this biopsy. And I really don't think that's what it is, but that is the best way to just take it off the table. So I'm like, hey, sure, at this point, whatever, I'm blind. I got to do something. And at the very end, as he's sitting there typing in these dozen or so things, my voice did the thing. I was talking across the room to him and I just, everything jumbled up. He stopped. I will never forget this. He stopped, turned right over and looked at me and he said, what's that? And I said, this comes and goes. And I told him all of my ways of doing things. And right then he said, I'm going to add one more blood test that you're going to take. This is going to take a week for us to get back because it's going to Mayo. That was the MOG titers. Wonder if he knew it was going to come back as positive as it did. So my actual diagnosis showed up on February 5th. When I hear other people's stories, basically it was a month and a half before I had a diagnosis. Felt like a century because you panic.
Yep.
It's like, nobody can explain this to me. If it's this, then we do that. Well, nobody knew what this was going on. So he sent that off. It came back very positive. And I'll never forget. I first heard because he initially sent these results midday on that Wednesday to that neurologist who'd been moving me back, put it through as like an urgent message. 4:30, somebody on her staff called me and the message was, so your doctor from the eye center called and your test came back and it shows it's positive and what you need are IV steroids and you can come here to the emergency room to do that if you'd like. And I thought, that's a little too lackadaisical for me.
Yeah.
I called his office. I said, I just really want to talk to him. And within 5 minutes, they called me back. It was just like immediate that he called me back. And I thought, okay. So we talked about where I live outside of Chicago. So I do have choices. There are many people who don't. So I've been very fortunate in this misfortune of being geographically situated, and a couple different places I could go to. The closest one to me, Loyola Medical Center. And I said, would you go there? He's like, yeah, I would. So he said they know what this is and they know what to do with it there. So in the middle of a nice storm, of course, Chicagoland, it was midnight before they pulled me back. Because there were no beds in the hospital, I got my first IV steroids in the emergency room. God help anybody around me when I'm on steroids. I am not a nice person.
Yeah.
Vicious is about the only word I can say to myself, because I just wanted to crawl right out of my skin. Nothing anything could say or do was right. It's just stop to whatever, just go away. That's how I am with that. So anyway, when I finally got a room, after they took me to IR and put a port in, I did the 10 days, 5 sessions of that's where they take your blood out, clean the antibodies out, put you back in the radiator flush, as we called it. I forgot how many days of the IV steroids, and then we started the oral taper. I was in hospital for 10 days. Ironically, the day I was discharged at 3:30 p.m. was February 18th. I was leaving the hospital an hour before that chronically rescheduled neurology appointment from the other place. Like, I was already diagnosed, treated, and on my way home with a plan before I'd even would have seen that person. And Lord knows what my condition would have been like. So went home, PT and OT, we did it in home for a month. And I was just like, I don't want to deal with that cane. I want to do those stairs again. Those were my goals. And we did certain exercises and this and that. But the one thing that worked for me, because I kept saying, I wonder how much of my balance is the fog. Oh, I went from being completely blind. Super Bowl Sunday, we were watching the game in the hospital room. And suddenly I looked up at the television and I covered my good eye, very foggy, but instead of black, I was getting peripheral, very hazy. I could tell the difference between the two colors of jerseys. And I'm like, this nurse came in. I'm like, does anybody want to know this? Yes. The next morning when you're in a teaching hospital, the army comes in. They're like, hey, talk to me about this vision stuff. But that is where I'm still at. I've got that very hazy peripheral, but it's like there's a block, right? It's just a big foggy cloud right in the middle of it because of what my vision is, even with correction. Yeah, that was a real kick to my soul the day that my disability company, sent the letter that said, yes, we've heard from all your specialists and you are indeed disabled. That didn't sit well with me for a long time. I think at this point, I am walking without a cane. I can use a cane if I'm in an unknown place, or there's going to be a lot of people around me that you never know who's going to jostle you. It's just more of a security than an absolute necessity now. There are times, but I feel it. I can feel it moving up my neck, and I just take a point and go. So in those two areas, definitely improved. The vision is not, and that's what is still keeping me at home. I have not been given the go ahead to return to work because my work involves me being able to clearly see a monitor. Sure. And they're funny. At 11 o'clock this morning, my time over here, I just had a repeat orbit MRI, and we're going through all the repeat testing. I just had my 6-month checkup with my neurologist at Loyola, doing another MOG titer, which I'm waiting on. He threw a Sjogren's thing in there only because I've had horribly dry eyes.
Okay.
And is that pollen? Is that this? We don't know, but I don't have Sjogren's, so there's that. MRI of the orbits again. And Sandra, you'll appreciate this. Yes, incontinence is one of those things. Now, in the 2 years ago, I had seen a Urogyn about stress incontinence because I am a lady with 3 kids. Gravity is always there. I had gone to physical therapy, and the urogynecologist suggested, because I was having like kind of constant UTIs, low grade UTIs, something called D-mannose. It's a supplement. It keeps bacteria from hanging around on like bladder walls and ureter walls and all that. So you flush it out faster. And I've been doing well with that. Pelvic floor physical therapy was doing great for me. I learned all different kinds of strategies. I learned I was doing Kegels all around. So there you go. Things you learn. But in the meantime, my neurologist has also recommended an MRI of my lumbar spine because the last one I had was back on December 17th when we thought I had just twisted something. He said, you can develop lesions.
Right.
One thing that is actually been ordered is something called Ampura. And that we're doing specifically for the eye. It's a central nervous system stimulator. Basically, my eye works. It's just the optic nerve behind it correctly send the signals to the brain.
Right.
It's a frayed wire. But some signals are now getting through because I've got that blurred vision. One of the reasons I won't drive is even if I'm sitting as passenger, if we're pulling up to traffic light or red light, I can feel we are stopped. But if I'm looking at the car in front of me, it still looks like it's slowly coming at me. And that just throws me into a panic. I'm convinced my husband's going to run into parked cars. It's processing at a different speed. And it kind of makes your head a little nuts too, because you've got things are swirling around at different speeds in there. I think of that turnaround at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris where you just see cars and they're going all over. And my neurologist's explanation was that what it can help do is speed up those signals that are trying to get through your injured optic nerve so that if they catch up a little bit, you won't have that things are moving or the depth thing. And I'm like, but won't that speed up this side? He's like, that eye is already working quickly enough that you won't notice the speed difference, but you might notice it here. That's on order to show up this weekend, so I haven't started that. Depending on what the MOG titers show and what this latest Orbit MRI scan shows, he had talked about doing another course of steroids, possibly plasmapheresis again, depending what my numbers are at. Interestingly, I know I said everybody who's on IVIG loves it, intravenous immunoglobulins, but he's a fan of it for intracranial. We are really going after your optic nerve here. That's what's the biggest slowdown here. He said, I love it. I think it's great for MS, but anything inside of your brain, I'm not a big fan of it. We can make a case for it if we want to use it. Well, that rituximab got thrown out there. But again, we're still not making quite that decision yet because we've got some test results to wait on. Pretty rapid turnaround. Felt like an eternity, but compared to years that people have had mysterious symptoms that nobody could. I think I'm very blessed that I am in an area with multiple teaching hospitals around me, that I stumbled across a physical therapist who had the decency to say, I can't help you. I'm not your best person, but this is the specialist you want. He's the only person who ever said that to me.
Yeah.
That never came down from the neurologist at my local hospital or anything like that. They've done other great things. But this one, I was just like, okay, I think I know what I'm going to be doing now. But yeah, I get frustrated because I want to do 1,000 things. And, oh, wait, no, I can't.
Can either of you tell me if you have added symptoms or anything flares where you can notice it in stress?
Hot weather brought everything.
Yes.
Hot weather is not a friend of autoimmune anybody.
I live in Vegas.
I have had 3 deaths this past year. Unfortunate. First my grandpa, and then the next day, my stepmother.
Wow.
And this past February, it was my nan.
Wow.
And I had to keep my stress in balance. And it was hard because of doing all those. I did mom's eulogy. I read something from my stepdad, my stepsister, myself, and I read a poem. And I only slurred a little bit when I got emotional about what I had to say about mom. Other than that, people were looking at me like, Shannon is looking at me like, you had what when? Like they couldn't believe it.
When I listen to everybody tell their initial stories, like their first flare, every one of you had a different story. For a clinician, what a nightmare. How do you figure that out?
And Marla, Have any of the doctors ever spoken to you about an anti-inflammatory diet or anything along those lines?
Mediterranean.
Okay,
They
so
love
have you
the Mediterranean diet.
Love it.
And I'll say that's a pretty easy one for me.
Yeah.
Sicilian lean pro. My thing is trying to find how do I get more protein in my body in a day. As far as the one bad thing, as far as having to wipe things off, that intense use of steroids and then going through the orals, it's changed my palate. Alcohol doesn't taste right. Certain kinds of sweets, like hard candy, chocolate bars, just that tastes like metal in my mouth. Not a bad problem to
Yeah.
have. The one thing that never tasted bad to me, ice cream. That's the next one I like to say. So I get quality ice cream, not garbage. There's more nuts and grains and Greek yogurt and fruit and veggies in my house than when all my kids were home. But that's how snacking on walnuts is my go-to. The only thing I've done on my own, I read, and this is probably more MS than anything else. I was convinced I was going to be told I had MS, by the way. At some point, I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
Now to be told you basically have a distant cousin. I read that omega-3s are good for rebuilding myelin. And so I added a fish oil because, yeah, I can eat tuna and salmon all the time. On the point, there's this other person that I live with and cook with. Not a big salmon fan. Neurologist did say, up your vitamin D. That was another big one for him. But the rest of the time, the only medications I'm on now are the ones I was on before thyroid, because I don't have one, statin, and then another medication for a kidney thing that had going on. But I was on those beforehand. Everything else is over-the-counter supplement type of stuff. We haven't added the big guns because we're waiting to see if I need to. I've heard a great phrase at the conference. She was talking to somebody who was talking about something frustrating her, and she leaned across and said, "We do what we can." I'm like, that has changed my attitude and lowered my blood pressure tremendously in the past couple of weeks. I'm doing what I can now.
Exactly.
Over the holiday weekend, saw a bunch of extended family, and everybody just looks at me. They're like, "How come you're not back at work? Look at you, you're fine." And it's really frustrating about this, and I'm sure everyone feels the same way. I may be sitting there smiling at you, talking to you in this, but my head is on spin cycle. Many kids have this. They told me, they're like, it's weird for you to have this because kids usually get it. What those parents have gone through, because you're talking about a child who's doing sports one week and then boom, can't be there for 3 weeks or something. And just trying to make that life as normal as can be. And I'm stunned by the resilience of the young women and young men for that matter, like in their late 20s, early 30s, little baby, young kids at home, and they're just making it happen. I'm like, I turned 64 the day I went blind. So I'm just coasting into Medicare can kick in. And then go with that.
I just want to say thank you so much for your time, for sharing your story. I think it's so empowering to hear, especially when we have situations where there was something fairly traumatic and tragic that happened all at one time, and then you have managed to fight your way back to the person that you are today, even if there's still ways to go, that you're already on a path toward healing and living a healthier life, hopefully. So thank you. Thanks for listening to the Living Simpler podcast. If today's episode gave you a spark of clarity or confidence, be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. It helps more women find this message. Want more wellness tips and real talk? Come hang out on Instagram at Amy Mewborn or visit living-simpler.com.